Final Fantasy XIV excels at designing fun and unique classes, and the Astrologian is no exception. It is a fast-paced, actions-heavy healer that offers challenging but rewarding gameplay. There's a lot to cover here, so get comfy and let's get into it. Like all healers in-game, Astro has lots of opportunities to weave in skills in between their GCDs. Most of their healing toolkit exists as OGCDs, and their card system is entirely off the global cooldown. With that in mind, one of the keys to excelling with this class is comfort. So before we jump into talking about our skills, let's take a moment to talk about our setup. By the way, if terms like OGCD and weaving are confusing, I'll link a video explaining them in the description as well as in an info box up in the corner. Those principles are very important to improving as a healer or any class, so make sure to check that out. We'll be referencing them quite a bit. So this is my HUD. It looks a little strange, but I have things placed very intentionally across the screen. Now, I personally play with mouse and keyboard and use keyboard shortcuts for all of my actions. Whichever method you use to play is totally viable. Whether it's controller, clicking with the mouse, using an MMO mouse, or peripherals like the Tartarus, however you choose to play is fine as long as it's comfortable for you. With your chosen option, the first thing we need is visibility. I have my Arcana gauge, where you see your cards, just to the left of center near my character. All around that, I have my major cooldowns that I need to keep an eye on. Things like Earthly Star and Divination need to be used on cooldown, so I need to be able to see when they are becoming available. I also have resources like Neutral Sect over there. I don't necessarily use this as soon as it comes off of cooldown, but I do need to look over at a glance and see if it's ready, especially in a prog setting. I also have Lightspeed, Astrodyne, Essential Dignity, and Minor Arcana over there. All of these are tools that I want to be able to see without taking my eye off of the enemy during the fight. There are some notable things missing from this side panel. Celestial Opposition, Horoscope, and Collective Unconscious are all on my lower hotbars. This is more of a personal preference for me. Most of my time is spent raiding, and there are specific points in fights where I am using these abilities, and know that they will be off cooldown when I need them. That being said, there's no reason you can't have these in a more visible location. Whatever you need to make sure you are using the resources you have as they are available is going to be the best way to set it up. Lastly, all of my GCDs are on my lower left hotbar. These are not things that I need to keep an eye on. They are tools that are always available. I also have everything hotkeyed, so I'm not searching for them at any point. The next thing we need is ease of access. We mentioned that Astro is a very fast-paced class. It has lots of single and double weaving opportunities throughout the course of a fight, and you should take advantage of these whenever possible. For instance, Combust, which is the Astrologian's damage over time spell, is an instant cast GCD. This means that as soon as we use it, the global cooldown is active and we can't use another GCD until it resets. This is a very common double weave window that we can take advantage of every single time. As it happens, Combust's damage over time lasts 30 seconds. Coincidentally, our card draw has a 30-second cooldown and is an instant cast OGCD ability. So immediately after using Combust, we can then draw a card in that window of time. You can, in theory, then play that card within the same weave window. This is, however, very difficult. I personally can't process that information quite that quickly without delaying my GCD, so let's look at a different option. Celestial Intersection is another OGCD ability that applies a heal and shield to the target and happens to also have a 30-second cooldown. Let's put all this together now. Every 30 seconds, we can combust, draw a card, and cast Celestial Intersection on our tank, all without delaying our next GCD. This is a simple but very important example of the weaving you'll do on Astro. Your cards need to be drawn on cooldown to get the most use out of them throughout a fight, and topping off and mitigating damage to the tank every 30 seconds will always help to make things run smoothly. This is why it's important to have these skills laid out in an easy to access manner. You should be doing a pattern like this every 30 seconds without fail, barring any downtime in the fight, so you want to make it easy on yourself. My setup for this is as follows. I have Combust on the 2 key. My hands live on WASD, so it's right there, well within reach. Card draw for me is Shift Q. Card play is Shift E, and Celestial Intersection is Alt E. It might sound strange, but that is all very comfortable for my hand. Going from pressing 2 to Shift Q to Alt E has a smooth rhythm for me. I don't feel awkward going from one to the next, and for a pattern that I'll be repeating 20 or more times in a fight, this is super important. This thought process can be applied to the rest of our skills as well. Most of Astro's healing is done using OGCD tools, therefore it is important to be able to weave them comfortably. I have Horoscope on Alt Tilt and Celestial Opposition on Alt Q. These are very easy combinations for my hand, and just as importantly, I'm not taking my hand away from the left side of the keyboard for any of this. I can stay at my home base of WASD the entire time, all while having my important skills within reach. This is the logic we want to apply to however we play. If you're using a controller, the fewer button presses you need to access a skill repeatedly, the better. If you're going to be clicking your skills, make sure they're within a short distance of wherever you typically keep your mouse. Additionally, take some time to tool around with your sensitivity settings. If you're going to be clicking a lot, accuracy is very important. I like to run on a very high sensitivity so that I'm moving my mouse as little as possible, but that doesn't work for everyone. Again, and I can't stress this enough, whatever is most comfortable for you is going to lead to the most efficient setup. There is not one right way to set your skills and your HUD. Customize it to your needs. The 1-2-3 damage rotation of healing is really a 1-1-1 rotation. Yes, everyone memes on white mages for being glare mages, but the reality is that all of the healers will live around their single target DPS tools in fights, and then use their healing tools only as necessary. For Astrologian, that's Malefic, or Gravity if you're in a dungeon. On paper, this is simple enough. Your primary source of damage comes from your single target DPS spell. The complexity comes from being consistent with this throughout different mechanics and movement. Additionally, you need to make sure that when you're healing, you're not interrupting your GCD unless absolutely necessary. Remember, Final Fantasy XIV is designed around all classes doing damage. One of the best things to work on first is getting consistent with your damage uptime while still healing the party. Outside of Malefic, Astrologian does come with multiple other very important damage sources. Combust, as we mentioned previously, is our damage over time ability. It is an instant cast GCD that lasts 30 seconds on the enemy target. This should always be a weave window for you to, at the very least, draw a card. This is going to serve as a waymark. Think of it as an additional way to keep an eye on your abilities. If we know that every time we use Combust, we also draw a card, and use Celestial Intersection if you can, then we know that when Combust falls off an enemy, our card draw is off of cooldown. So by keeping an eye on the Combust timer, we're actually keeping an eye on 3 different cooldowns we need to be managing, all while looking within a single location. Simplifying what we have to manage is key when we are looking to add structure, and structure is what we need to improve our gameplay. Lightspeed is one of our greatest tools as it allows you to instant cast all of your GCDs for its duration. It's important to note that this isn't intended to be used as a panic button for healing. It is instead intended to be used for your busier weave windows around your opener and your uses of Astrodyne. Since all of your GCDs will now be instant cast, you can now double weave after every single use. You'll see the most use of it during your opener, which, while busy, is a lot of fun when successfully executed. We'll go into detail about that opener later. In the middle of the fight, we'll use it for our Astrodyne windows. After we have drawn our last card during our combust, we can then use Malefic into Lightspeed, immediately into Malefic, play, Astrodyne, and another Malefic, without interrupting our GCD at all. Part of the complexity of Astrologian comes with fulfilling your role as a healer and support class, while also staying consistent with your damage. The goal is to never stop rolling your GCD throughout the entire fight, and Lightspeed is one of our #1 skills for doing this. Divination will serve as our main party buff during fights. It sits on a 120-second cooldown, and one of your highest priorities will be using it as soon as it's available in order to line up with everyone else's buff windows. Final Fantasy XIV operates primarily within 60 and 120-second cooldown windows. In short, every minute, one or more of your party members will be throwing out a strong attack or party buff, with the more powerful versions typically available at 2 minutes. So, with that in mind, it is crucial to make sure we're giving out that party-wide 6% damage buff in line with everything else. The opener for Astro is complex, but when you get it down, you'll feel like a professional esports player. Let's break this down one skill at a time, and then I'll demonstrate. The first thing is to draw your first card as soon as the instance loads. The goal, ultimately, is to distribute 3 cards and use both Astrodyne and Divination during the opening seconds of the fight. To accomplish this, we need to draw a card early enough that card draw is ready by the time the encounter begins. The rest of the opener will begin around 5 seconds back on the countdown. A quick preface before moving forward: this is the general idea for the opener. You can make certain tweaks depending on which encounter you're going into. So, at 5 seconds back, we will place our earthly star in the center of the arena. Ideally, this will go off immediately after the first raid wide or tank buster of the encounter, healing it without you using any additional resources. At 3 seconds back, use whatever the current tincture is. At 1.5 seconds back, we'll begin casting Malefic. With this timing, it will go off right at the beginning of the encounter. Now things will get very busy. Including our pre-pool Malefic, the order is as follows: Malefic, Lightspeed, Combust, play, draw, Malefic, play, draw, Malefic, play, Divination, Malefic, Minor Arcana, Astrodyne, Malefic. There's a lot going on here. You're talking about 17 actions in about 17 seconds, and that's assuming the opener goes perfectly. Remember, the goal with Astrodyne is to get at least 2 unique seals, so if you draw a duplicate, you'll need to redraw, and that will push your actions down the line. If that happens though, it's all good. Things getting shifted in the opener is no cause for panic or worry. The only thing that will be majorly impacted will be your Astrodyne, which is just a personal buff. No matter how your card draws play out, your Divination can still land in the same spot every single time, and this is the priority. Secondly, don't sweat getting all 3 seals for Astrodyne. If it happens, wonderful, but if it doesn't, the damage boost for all 3 seals is not going to make or break the encounter. The mana regen and haste are higher priority, and for those, you only need 2 out of the 3 seals. The best advice I can offer for the opener is to just practice it repeatedly. It's a lot of information to process, but once you have it down, it just becomes muscle memory. So, spend some time with a training dummy to begin getting your hands used to it. It'll happen with time. And again, like we talked about before, the key to this opener is your own personal comfort. Take your time to set up your HUD and your keybinds in a way that is easy for you to maneuver. Your biggest assets for healing as an Astrologian all exist off the global cooldown, and half of them become exponentially more effective when planned out properly. Earthly Star is on a 60-second cooldown. After placing it, it will detonate after 20 seconds, unless you choose to detonate early. This is one of your best tools for dealing with raid-wide attacks. Most encounters in Final Fantasy XIV will begin with some kind of raid-wide party damage. If you place your star at the beginning of the match, at around 5 seconds back from the countdown like we talked about in the opener, it will detonate and heal the party immediately following the party-wide attack. From this point on, you'll want to just use it on cooldown outside of a few optimizations and fights, which you can learn over time. It's worth noting that this is also a great source of damage for you throughout the fight, so getting as many stars down as possible is a great goal to strive towards. Essential Dignity is a very useful, quick, and powerful heal. It is great for healing a tank back up after a big buster, or if the tank uses an invulnerability that reduces their HP to 1. Don't be afraid to use it on other members of the party too. If someone accidentally strays into damage, it's a great way to get them back to a comfortable space without using a GCD to top them off. You have 2 stacks of Essential Dignity, each on a 40-second cooldown, so don't be afraid to use this liberally. Next, we have Horoscope. This is a 200 potency heal on its own that will trigger a second time in 10 seconds unless you prime it with a Helios or aspected Helios. At that point, it becomes a 30-second delay and a 400 potency follow-up heal. This is a great skill, but it benefits most from a lot of forethought. Something to consider with this skill is when it's appropriate to prime it and when it's worth just using an unprimed version in conjunction with another skill. Remember, to prime it, you need to use a Helios or aspected Helios, costing us a Malefic. While it's tempting to get the extra healing from using a Helios and primed Horoscope, it may not be necessary. This is a skill to test out in different scenarios. After certain hits, all you may need is a Horoscope with a Celestial Opposition to cover the damage. The less we can use our GCDs for healing, the better. Celestial Opposition is next, and this one's pretty straightforward. This is a 200 potency heal for the party with an additional region of 100 potency over 15 seconds. This should be a pretty standard go-to for raid-wide damage. Especially as people begin to get better and better gear, it's likely that all you'll need is this and perhaps a Horoscope to cover most hits in a fight. Now on to Collective Unconscious. This skill offers 10% damage mitigation for anyone standing in the bubble, as well as a 100 potency regen for 15 seconds. There's a few things to talk about here. Firstly, the mitigation. Without getting outside of my depth here, Final Fantasy XIV operates on server ticks. You'll notice that when you use Collective Unconscious, that the mitigation effect stays up for a couple seconds until the next server tick happens, even if you move right away. This is very important. It means that we can weave in this ability in between Malefics to shield our allies, but we don't need to delay our next GCD if we time it correctly. Secondly, it's easy to forget that this skill comes with a regen effect as well. It's tempting to follow up a party-wide hit with healing, but as long as the damage isn't too substantial, the regen will likely top everyone off in addition to anything your co-healer is doing, so there won't always be a need to use additional resources. We'll briefly touch on Exaltation. This is an incredible skill and its use is very straightforward. It's designed for tank busters. When the enemy begins casting one, use Exaltation on the tank. It'll mitigate the damage and restore a portion of their health after 8 seconds. The big advice here is to not panic and cancel your GCD when you see a tank buster being cast. They typically have very long cast times, giving you plenty of time to finish your current cast, weave in Exaltation, and then resume your Malefics. Lastly, we have our capstone skill, Macrocosmos. This is an amazing ability, albeit one that comes with a lengthy cooldown. This is designed to heal massive damage across the entire party without you needing to be at the center of everyone. Simply use it before the damage comes out, and then you can either wait for the effect to expire at 15 seconds, or you can trigger it manually. This is particularly useful in encounters with back-to-back big hits of damage, or in instances where you are forced away from the party. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to Astrologian and healing in general. We didn't discuss any of our GCD healing abilities in detail. This isn't to say that you shouldn't use them. Particularly in a progression setting, it's very important to use them if it means keeping the party alive to see the next mechanic. Skills like Synastry are great in niche situations as a last resort to top off the tank. But always remember that healers are designed in Final Fantasy XIV to do damage unless you have to heal the party. The longer a fight goes on, the more difficult it becomes for everyone involved. Your damage output is incredibly important, which is why it's so crucial to optimize it as best as you can. Anytime we can use our OGCD resources to heal the party up, this is the way to go. The information doesn't stop here either. This is meant to be a general starter's guide for Astrologian. There are lots of things to learn about when it comes to optimizing your healing and damage, as well as working with your co-healer. Further, the approach to dungeons will be vastly different than raids or trials, and within each category there's unique things for each encounter to consider. Don't let it overwhelm you. Think of it as a bunch of different opportunities to learn. Astro can be stressful and a lot to manage, but it will always be rewarding, exciting, and exhilarating to play. And a quick reminder, take your time. There's no pressure to learn this class as quickly as possible. Go at a pace that works for you. I hope this guide helps you get started and can be a resource moving forward. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more guides in the future, and drop a comment down below if there are still questions. Until next time, I'll see you out there.